Joining us now with a transcript of these emails is Neil Patel, publisher of thedailycaller.com. Neil, thank you so much for being here. This story is explosive, and it all roots back to this thing called JournoList, a forum in which left-wing journalists have been going on and essentially railing about whatever cause it is they want to rail about. And we saw it essentially ruin the career of Dave Weigel. He ruined his own career. He was a guy at the Washington Post who was supposed to be covering the conservative movement. Meantime, he's on this JournoList bashing conservatives, who he's supposed to be covering fairly. He got booted. And now you guys have gotten a hold of some more explosive correspondence from this list. Tell us.
That's right, Megan. It's a group of about 400 journalists, some academics, and some political activists, but a lot of people representing quote-unquote mainstream media institutions. When asked about the list, the founder and other members always said it was just an innocent discussion group. But we, talking about sports and all kinds of really non-incendiary topics, what we have found are discussions in there directly working to try to elect Barack Obama, and doing so in the most sort of loathsome ways, including when the Jeremiah Wright issue exploded onto the scene, actively strategizing on how to kill that story. The story must be killed to protect Obama. How do we kill it? And the most incendiary thing we found was one guy actually said, well, let's pick some conservative, pick Fred Barnes or Karl Rove. It doesn't even matter who it is, and call him a racist.
And we have that. I want to show the viewers exactly what you discovered. It's a guy named Spencer Ackerman of the Washington Independent who comes out with the following quote. He says, "It's not necessary to jump to Wright's defense. What is necessary is to raise the cost on the right of going after the left. Instead, take one of them, Fred Barnes, Karl Rove, who cares, and call them racists. Ask, why do they have such a deep-seated problem with a black politician? This makes them sputter with rage, which in turn leads to overreaction and self-destruction." So Spencer hatches this plan, and the other JournoList contributors say what, Neil?
Well, to be fair to the groups, a lot of them said, well, we don't want to go with that, but it was mostly on strategic grounds, like that'll backfire, that won't help Obama enough. You had a really large group sitting by while these discussions veered into just almost the bizarre. I mean, there is nothing as harsh in America than the race card. There's no harsher accusation that you can throw on someone that they're a racist, and that's the kind of discussions they were having. Again, all designed to protect and help Barack Obama in the midst of his election campaign.
I mean, having looked at these things for yourself, is there any doubt in your mind that this group of left-wing so-called journalists thought that one very real possibility that could work to the advantage of the president they wanted was to bash anybody on the right who would raise questions about Jeremiah Wright as a racist, that would be a tactic that could really work for them?
There's absolutely no doubt. It's up on our site on Daily Caller that a lot of them were saying that. We're advocating that. Not every single one of the 400, but we have quotes on there which are completely accurate, where a bunch of them are saying that.
Who's in there, Neil? Is it all left-wing columnists? Because that's one thing. If you've got a left-wing columnist for a left-wing magazine,
Yep.
Okay. I mean, they identify themselves as opinion people.
It's definitely a combination. There are, I would say, the most aggressive commentators are the so-called left-wing columnists, but you have representatives of virtually every major media institution on the group represented and involved in many of these discussions. You also have people who are out-and-out political activists. Jared Bernstein, who went into the administration, was listed in the piece we had today, and there are others. So it's a combination of lefties, of academics, and of full-on straight journalists.
And the question is, Neil, even though now JournoList is gone, right, after the whole Weigel thing, I mean, they learned their lesson. Maybe it's not a great idea to put these things down in writing. But the question is whether that continues to be the strategy of some to try to discredit legitimate news reports.
That's absolutely the question. JournoList is gone. From reading the piece we had today, it's hard to imagine. I don't know for a fact what discussions are still going on, but these were pretty intimate discussions by people who clearly were working together pretty often and were being unbelievably open, shockingly open. So the notion that no one's talking anymore, that'd be kind of hard to believe, and especially in a world where a bunch of stories do get ignored by a lot of the media. The Acorn piece comes out, and besides Fox News and Andrew Breitbart on the web, no one really wanted to cover it for a long time. We see evidence in what we've published today of the exact type of behind-the-scenes strategizing that must or did go on to try to kill at least one story, and probably goes on to try to kill a bunch of others. And we see that carried out in the news when these things get ignored.
Well, because we talked about the one plan, which is to denigrate those who do cover these stories as racist, or those who comment on those stories as racist, for example, going after Karl Rove or Fred Barnes, or in Spencer Ackerman's words, who cares, any one of them.
Right.
But then there's sort of part two of the strategy that is discussed, according to your report, which is just don't cover it. Don't give attention to it. And I want to give our viewers another example. This is from dailycaller.com, in what you're reporting. This is from Chris Hayes of The Nation. He writes, all this hand-wringing about just how awful and odious Reverend Wright's remarks are just keeps the hustle going. I'm not saying we should all rush en masse to defend Wright. What I'm saying is that there is no earthly reason to use our various platforms to discuss what about Wright we find objectionable. In other words, just ignore the story. Just stay away from it, and don't fuel the fire that they think is going to reflect poorly on their candidate.
Yeah, I think a reasonable read of this is that was actually both the purpose and probably the effect of this group. There were journalists on there from all sorts of, again, quote-unquote, mainstream organizations.
Well, that guy Weigel's from the Washington Post.
And it was founded by Ezra Klein of the Washington Post, and who they have, by the way, not just in the opinion section, but in the business section, commenting on economic policies as a pretty straight guy running in their business section, not labeled as a political activist. I think the biggest effect of this was, and you can see it there in that quote from The Nation, to push the other journalists to stay off certain stories or get on other stories. That seems to me to be what the real impact was. Yeah,
and the Washington Post, I mean, just this weekend was called out by its own ombudsman for not covering the new Black Panther case and the DOJ whistleblower scandal more. And they basically cited lack of resources, but their ombudsman not happy with them, and they're ignoring that story. Neil, it's a fascinating read, and it's at thedailycaller.com. Thank you so much for sharing the information with us.
Thanks, Megyn.
Well, some potentially big news